Welcome.
You're live.
Who's speaking first today?
I'll say welcome
right.
to Right Now. I'm Valerie Ihsan.
I'm Joanna Bartlett.
Julie Dawn.
And welcome to our live streaming YouTube channel. We are at episode 4 now, and Joanna's phone is ringing. It's Monday, May 21st, and today we're talking about memoir and how it can be different than fiction and how the writing process might be different than when you write fiction. So first we're going to do our check-in.
Yep.
Julie, what did you think?
Okay, so writing-wise, I got my first scene is like finally blended and good, and I had a lot of farm work to do this week, so
laundry.
And laundry, and there's always laundry, so much laundry, and what? What was I going? So which actually worked out well because I have some weird kind of elements going on in my current work.
Work in progress?
Yeah,
The book?
and I kind of figured out some yin yang type of elements that while I was out farming came in, and I was like, "Ooh, that's good." So now it's just a matter of putting them in there.
All right.
Oh, that's great.
I also got my nose pierced, which I took 20 years to do. So, which, like, what does that have to do with writing? A whole bunch, because I'm coming into my own, and I really think that that's going to help with writing-wise. So,
Like writing with your writing voice? Or
yeah, and I think writing progress faster because the self-doubt is kind of getting mushed a little bit.
okay.
So just being more authentically you.
Yeah.
Being you unapologetically.
Nice.
Going, look, I got this thing in my nose.
Yes!
You can suck
Nice.
it. Great. My 11-year-old wants a nose ring as well.
Yes.
I told them they need to wait till they're a teenager at least to have something to rebel with. You know,
I think
you got to
it looks
keep some
cool,
things.
but dude, how do you blow your nose and like let's just
Yeah, I'm
You
we'll
can let
see.
us know.
and if you're a nose
I'm like
picker,
trying to
like,
pick
how
it.
would you
Oh
do
yeah,
that?
no, I'm trying to pick, and I'm like,
Maybe it'll discourage the nose picking. Anyway, so this last
Moving
week,
on.
I've been hosting an online write-in with Word Crafters, which is a local writing group in Eugene. It's online, it's virtual. It's finally occurred to me to tell everybody about it. It's on Tuesdays from 1 to 2:30 p.m. Pacific time. You can join via Zoom. I'll stick a link in the description for this video. And anybody can join. It's no cost, though you can always buy Word Crafters the equivalent of a cup of coffee with a donation. And we put our butts in a chair and we write for an hour and a half with a break in the middle, and we get stuff done. I got my online course up and running. It's live
that's
now.
exciting.
It can be. So that's good. I actually checked this morning. I have one student that's taken like 98% of the course.
Wow.
So people are actually doing it, which is always nice, other than just signing up for it. And then I got some blog posts written and some videos done. The blog posts courtesy of that butt-in chair writing time of my weekly
I subscribed to your blog
writing. Yeah, I saw
yesterday.
that.
Okay, cool.
Thanks. So that's what I've been up to.
I have been working on the revision on the memoir, and I also took a fabulous master class with Tex Thompson on Saturday. It was fabulous and really dived deep looking at the first 15 pages of a couple of best-selling books and breaking them down to try to emulate that with your book. So this week I'll be working on my first 15 pages and sending them to the instructor to get critiqued.
Oh, that's cool.
And then I'm also going to be working on my class, which is not online, but I have a how to write a novel or memoir class starting next month. Actually, is it next week? In 2 weeks. In 2 weeks it'll start. And I need to start working on the PowerPoint presentations. So that is going to be what I'm working on this week.
Yeah, those look good. So that brings us to our question of the week, which is, what's our question of the week? What is the hardest part of story building for you?
This was a hard question for me.
Me too. So my answer, I put all of it. It's all hard for me. So for me, I think really it's in terms of story building being like kind of like that charting the course of the story, building the whole story, all the elements and things that happen. That's how I took it anyway. So for me, it's kind of like finding that balance between plotting and pantsing.
Okay.
So that you have enough structure. I have enough structure that I like to know where the story is going. So if I can, so my first book that I wrote, which is a memoir, which we'll talk about later in a bit, totally pantsed the whole thing, but it had a structure. It had kind of a built-in structure because it was based on 4 years of my life. So it had a beginning, middle, end, whole, and it kind of fell into place. But then in other work that I've done, I've decided I don't want to completely just start from wherever and end up wherever, because it gets a bit meandery along the way, and I don't like cutting out tons and tons of what I've written, because it annoys me. I guess I'm too attached to the words. So kind of finding that balance of structure so I know where I'm heading, even if I don't know all of the little I don't want to write it out beat by beat, because then it's like I've already told the story and I have no desire then to retell the story in narrative for me.
Okay. I do plot. I use Scrivener, and so when I plot out a story, I make little scenes and I just write a couple sentences or maybe a paragraph if something's coming to me, or even sometimes when I am working in my outline, I'll have an idea for a scene and dialogue will come out. So I'll just type that out too, just so I have it. And then when it comes time to actually write that scene, I've got something even started already. So I don't have a problem with not wanting to write it once I've put the beats out. I think my hardest part is the structure of the novel, or in my case, the memoir right now. And that's even harder, I think, for me right now, is coming up with a structure for the story, where to start the story and in what order should things come in, and those sorts of things. I think that's the hardest part for story building for me, is just in what order should I tell this story? What would be the best way for this story to be told? And every once in a while, I don't have... Well, that's not true. Usually a character totally comes to me and says, this is my story and I want you to tell the story. It's like, and will dictate to me. And that's what happened with my first novel. I had a very clear picture of who the main character was, and she told me the story and I just wrote it down. So that was awesome. But other times I wonder if the best way to tell a story is actually not from the main character's point of view. Like maybe somebody else would be better able to tell this story. And that slays me sometimes too. Like I worry about that.
I've read that that has happened with some writers, is that you write the story and you get done your first draft and then you realize, crap.
Yeah.
This isn't their story. It's actually the other character's story. So then they have to rewrite it, which is like...
That's annoying.
Yeah.
Yeah, for me, actually, with my the memoir that I'm turning into fiction, maybe, figuring out the point at which to tell the story from, where the character is in the story as they're telling the story, the order to tell the story in, that's the bit I've been kind of stuck on for a while, because I read books that go back and forth in time, back and forth in characters, and do different things, and I think they're amazing, and I don't know how to do that.
I never thought of doing that for a memoir, like going back and forth in time. I've never thought of that,
because that's how I've kind of envisioned it in my head, is that you start when she's 14ish and go back to when she's 10, but she's telling the story from 14, so sometimes you have the interspersed chapters of what's happening currently, what's happening in the past, because it all kind of echoes, and I haven't figured out how to do it. I worry perhaps I'm not that brilliant an author.
I feel like I'm a very creative person, but I also like stories linear. You know, that's my default.
Yeah.
Start at the beginning, end at the end.
Yeah, that's
but
mine too.
I recognize
But you're
that
supposed
that's
to sprinkle in some backstory, kind of like how fiction does it. Yes.
Right. Well, I'm talking about fiction or not. It doesn't.
But
It doesn't
still,
matter.
it's
Any
like,
story.
but the kind of the course of action starts here, moves forward in time, ends here,
Right.
and that's what I'm tempted to do as well. But I don't know that that's the best way to tell the story.
Right. And I don't know that that's the best way to tell every story, for sure.
Yeah.
So figuring out, yeah, that's the hardest part, I think, for me. What about you?
Julie just counts as everything, so it's fine.
I do. And that's why I love Stephen King's on writing advice, because so the majority of writers that I've met plot, just the people that I've come across. And when I read his book, not just because he's a horror writer, but also because of his advice was so much like how I draft and how I write. And I was like, oh, thank God I'm not alone, because when you start meeting everybody that does it that certain way, you know, you can feel really like, what the hell am I doing? But I have, I would say, two things that are the hardest for me, which is not taking advice when I'm writing, because I found that when I'm writing a book and I get to a stuck point, I will start reading other writers' advice. I start with like motivational writers' quotes, and then it just goes down, and then you get into like listening to agents' advice, and then you're taking all your authenticity out of your work, at least for me.
Are you talking about second draft now or rough draft?
No, just like all drafts. Like,
because the rough draft, nobody tells me any, like, you just write that out. Don't listen to anybody else. Just write whatever's there. And then you can get advice and beef up areas. But even, you're saying even then, it stops your creative process?
It makes me second guess myself. And I think I end up taking out things that I should leave in. Because, say, something's not hot in the market right now, so you're like, oh, I'm going to take it out unless, you know, whereas screw the market, write what you want to write. My other thing is I get lost in research a lot. Because I love ancient history, cultures, and just like tribal stories, and I can go down forever on that rabbit hole of research because it's just so fascinating. Like, I'll spend a week in Egypt and be like, okay, I need to stop researching and I need to just take whatever has seeped into me and put that in as it goes, because otherwise I'll research forever.
See, I don't do enough research. I don't think I like doing research. Like, unless I know how it's going to be used. Exactly.
I think I'm kind of in between. Like, if I know I need to research something, I'll research it, but I'm pretty cognizant of how long I'm spending. Sometimes I'll even set a timer.
So you watch YouTube videos forever about, I don't know, whatever it is.
No.
How to coach boys basketball.
No, and often I'll just write until I need that piece. Like and this didn't even end up in the book either. So when I was writing this Scent of Apple Tea, one of the characters was a banjo player, and I had a scene where she was changing the strings on her banjo, and I didn't know how to do that. So I looked up YouTube, and I, had a whole scene where she was changing the banjo strings, and they didn't end up in the story. So, but I only spent a short amount of time doing the research for it, because that was just the spot that I got to. Stop, research. Okay, go back to the book.
Sometimes at that point, I'll just do do some research about this here.
Yeah,
all caps, and just keep writing to get on with the story. All right, so we should move on now to our main topic. If you have a question for us for our question of the week, please leave it in the comments section below this video. We do have an email address, but we're not completely sure what it is, so we won't share it with you at the moment. Once Julie tells us what it actually is, we'll let you know what that is, and you can email us as well. So our main topic today is memoir. How is it different than writing fiction?
Well, I've done both, so should I start?
Sure.
Okay.
Oh, I have notes.
You have notes?
I do have notes.
Awesome. You've done both?
I've done both, yeah.
Okay. Well, you can start.
So my first note is you can do whatever you want in fiction. You can make it do whatever it is that you want, whereas memoir, should have some basis in the truth, in what actually happened. There's different schools of thought, though, on memoir and how close to it really happened that way it needs to be. I have a background in journalism, and so for me, the thing that has tripped me up, I think, in writing memoir is that in journalism, you quote people exactly. It's important that you do that, not just make things up that people say. And I know memoir isn't journalism, but it's a little bit painful somehow for me to kind of, especially timelines, because there's certain liberties that you can take with memoir in terms of making this, that seems to be accepted in terms of maybe condensing some characters together, making composite characters so that you don't have 50 million people in your book, or people I've even, workshops and classes I've taken have even said that you can, switch around the timelines a little bit if you need to hit those right beats in the story. And I just, I can't do that and call it memoir.
I think the crux of it is that everybody has their own boundary about what's acceptable and what's not in memoir. And
Acceptable as in what way?
The rules, the element of truth, and
Okay,
what's
the
okay.
balancing act.
Yeah,
Like at some point it's not memoir anymore.
if somebody
it's just fiction.
right, if somebody picks up a book and it says memoir on the outside, then there is an expectation for the reader and for the author,
that it really happened.
that it really happened. And in every story, you start out with a promise to the reader.
Yeah.
And so if you break faith with the reader, then you've lost all trust and they will never read you again. So in terms, my boundaries around memoir writing are, it's okay to compress time or stretch it out. Like if something happened 4 years down this timeline, but because you want to, you're working on the pacing of your memoir, you can put it over here. It still happened. It doesn't really matter when it happened, I think. So I think you can compress and stretch time a little bit. I don't think composite characters is okay in memoir. So I don't do that. I would rather leave characters out than to turn them into somebody that they're not. However, if you're trying to change if you're trying to work with privacy, and and just changing the name isn't going to do it for you, then I would definitely put a note in the front of the book that says, I've made some composite characters for the purpose of, privacy and hiding the identity of the characters in this book.
Or to help me not get sued.
Well,
that would be the other thing. I say in my memoir, I've changed the names of all the people that do the bad things.
Right.
Essentially, the people that are my friends and are nice to me, I don't need to change their names.
Right.
It's all the other people.
Right.
So I just changed everybody's names.
As long as
I think if you tell the reader that, as long as you're honest,
yes,
and say this is what I've done, these conversations aren't. They're to my recollection, which is obviously faulty, because I can't remember anything. Especially not stuff that happened when I was 11 and what my mother said exactly.
Right, and that's the other part about memoir in general, is that there is, I think that if you have the spirit or tone of the conversation, then that's okay. So when I read memoir, especially if it's a childhood memoir, I know that the dialogue is not going to be exact.
Yeah.
I know that it's approximated, but I also know that it is something that the writer is still trying to be truthful. And to the best of their recollection, this is what happened, and I'm reading that.
Or they would have said it like that.
Yes.
Because that's the type of things that they said.
Right.
All the time. Have you written any memoir?
So I am planning to write a memoir.
Okay.
I had a here we go with the too much information. I had a vaginal birth after 2 C-sections. The regular vaginal birth after 1 C-section is at 11% as of 2003 in the United States. I believe that's dropping to even lower, because when I wanted to have one here in Eugene, which does, the most natural births, I would say, would be more adamant about it. And the birthing center told me, nope. Yeah. And I wanted to have a VBAC, and they allow you to have your first one in the hospital here, assisted. But they said, no, for a second one, you cannot have one. There are 2 hospitals in the entire United States that are doing trial studies to allow you to. And it was just my circumstances and kind of just the way that things happened that allowed me to do it.
It's because you didn't give him any choice, but
pretty much, yes.
She just had a baby, who you hear in the background of this video clearly quite successfully had a baby. So
yes.
So that's what you wanted to write about?
Yeah.
Memoir. Okay.
There's a huge interest of women in it. Like if you Google, women are like, "Can you do it? Is successful? Are you going to die? Like the doctors tell you you're going to die. I'm here to tell you you're not going to die." I've been starting research. It's that shiny project that's trying to grab me from my other two.
Your 2 other novels that you're working on.
Yes.
You need to work on some finishing energy.
Yeah. So, and it's something I think I could plow out pretty quickly because it's recent.
Let me tell you. Memoirs are actually much harder. You would think, I got the characters already down. I got the plot already down. I just got to write it down. But it's hard. It's hard in a different way.
So, I was researching different things of memoir to kind of like set me up for it. And one thing that I've learned is that it's kind of a snapshot of your life, a certain period. So it's like taking a picture of this certain period in your life.
As opposed to autobiography, which is from birth to death, sort of. Well, not death, because then it wouldn't be autobiography.
Which I was thinking, like...
On my deathbed, the end. Sorry.
The, like, Steve Jobs autobiography.
Yeah.
Is, so that was kind of like okay, that's that, and then that's that. I read something that said, don't worry about hurting people when you're writing it.
When you're writing it, yeah.
Rough draft, you got to get the story out. But here's my rules of writing memoir, and it's going to be different for other people, maybe. I mean, yes, obviously. I give the people that I care about veto power. So, for instance, the book that I'm writing right now has my husband in it. And when I told him that, he was like, oh. While he might want to read stories about himself, he's a little more private than I am, and maybe he doesn't want them available for the public. So I assured him that I would let him read every chapter that he is in, and if he wants me to change anything or delete anything, I will, because my relationship with him is more important than the publication of this book. So that's what I would do. I would write it out.
Yeah, tell your truth.
Tell your truth. Change the names, do what you need to do to be safe, but then give the people,
if there are people
that you want to.
Yeah, I did that with mine. But I did that with mine, not veto power quite as much as like the chapters that certain friends, thanks to Facebook, actually have contact with again. I sent them the chapters saying, this is what I've written about you. Like, are you okay with this? And Mom was like, oh, you really need to change my name. My parents still don't know about this stuff. Like, come on, you're like 40 years old. Oh, look, my phone is ringing again. This is brilliant. And so I would say one of the main things that I find different between writing memoir and fiction is that because memoir is based on your experiences, there's that whole emotional connection and attachment to the story. And so even though you get attached to your fictional characters and to the story that you want to tell, I found that it's a different attachment than it is when it's your story. That it can be, I find it hard to kind of separate like what's best for the story versus, but it happened that way. You know, even the elements that you include in there, because obviously you don't tell every scene, every conversation from every day of your life in a memoir. It's a selection of the things that really tell the story.
There still has to be a literary arc, and
and so that part I find is harder to weed through and make clear decisions about, like what's for the good of the story.
So is that where you take it and give it to someone else and say, I mean, is it at a point where you can give it to someone else and say, I mean, it has to be another writer. It can't be a beta reader.
Receiving critique on memoir is much different than receiving critique on fiction, because the main character is you. And so
what do you mean you don't like the main character?
Right?
What do you mean she's whiny?
But part of that's still really good advice, though, or not advice, but critique. It's really good feedback to hear, because also what happens when you're writing memoir is you have the whole story in your head.
Oh, that's true.
You know everything. You can see it happening in your head because you've got the flashback memory, but you're not able to put that on the page for other people to read. So maybe your main character, which is yourself, is not fully developed on the page, and so the reader can't, enjoy that main character.
Yeah.
So
that's a good point.
So that's also something that's a little bit different. I could talk a lot about the differences between memoir and fiction, but our time is actually
we need to wrap up.
Okay.
So
I have I found a quote when I was researching about memoir.
Okay.
And so it's by Neil Simon, and he wrote The Play Goes On, and it's, you will suddenly realize the person you are instead of the person you thought you were.
Ooh.
Before and after writing a memoir. Would you say that's accurate?
If you have allowed yourself to go deep enough and to show, Rachel Herron says, show your shame on the page. So if you're hiding it from the readers, then you're still hiding it from yourself.
Yeah.
And
they said that was also
wouldn't
good.
Know
something that makes memoir really good is that you have to show your flaws to the reader, not just your, hey, I'm awesome.
Right. And that's embarrassing to do. It's a little hard to do.
All right, so we need to wrap up.
Okay.
And so you already told us what you're working on for next week a bit, your course.
Yes.
I don't know what I need to, oh God, I installed Trackerbox this morning and started trying to import things into it. It was like horrible, but we'll see. A bit clunky and painful looking. It didn't like my Ingram Spark reports. I need to mash keys some more, make it do what I want it to do. So I'll be doing that, and also trying to fix some audio sync issues I'm having with Camtasia, so that my videos aren't, words moving, mouth moving at completely different times. And host the whatever I'm doing, the write-in with Word Crafters. Be Write-In, it's called.
What about you? What are you doing this week?
I am still trying to plow away on my new one.
What about the old one?
The 70,000 one?
I don't know which one that is.
That's the one that...
Do the one that's mostly done. Did you do the hat thing?
I did the hat thing.
Okay, so you know which one you're working on then?
Yeah, it's the third one in my series.
Okay. So that's the one you're working on.
That is the one that I am working on.
We're going to make you keep working on it until you're done now. You realize this.
And my husband keeps telling me, we have too much stuff to do. You can't do writing right now. And I'm like, I am doing writing right now.
And then she goes, bam.
Just at least if
different
I can
kind
get
of bam.
some steps in, I'm making progress.
Yeah. Yes, that's true.
So,
thank you for joining us this week on Right Now. And if you have questions about memoir versus fiction, or any aspect of writing memoir, you can leave a question in the comments below the video. And another great resource, again, is Fast Draft Your Memoir by Rachel Herron. Do you have any quick resource recommendations for memoir writing?
Read lots of memoirs.
Yes.
I am.
Read lots.
I picked up this called to me, Angel Watch, and
is it a memoir?
a bunch. It's not, but it has a bunch of short
So personal essays are memoir.
And I I thought that was really interesting. It's a lot of like different woo woo stories.
We like the woo-woo. I like
But
the
I'm
woo-woo.
just flipping through it so fast that I'm kind of astonished.
All right.
That's cool.
So
All right.
short
New
memoir
method
works.
of
So please join us next week on Monday, May 28th, which is Memorial Day. Either here on YouTube live or in our studio audience at Tsunami Books. We will be talking about author mindset, self-doubt, imposter syndrome,